I'm Sheila Hemphill with Texas Right to Know. I just finished doing a presentation going over the various diagrams and the studies that we're seeing about what's happening with SARS-CoV-2 and the symptomology and what we're up against. I had invited a healthcare practitioner and a layperson to come and ask questions as they viewed the presentation. So Sharon, as a healthcare practitioner, what kind of questions do you have?
Okay, so I wanted to ask you what inspired you to go on this mission? Like, what did you see or learn to support your stance? Was it this information? How did it start?
It started with my precious mentor, Dr. Constantine Gus Costanis, who said when this started happening back in February, March, he said, Sheila, don't worry, ozone can take care of this virus. Because when you look at a vaccine and an antibody, you have to key like a Lego piece, and those antibodies have to fit onto a particular structure. The beauty of ozone is it is simply 3 atoms of oxygen that go in and oxidize this virus. It punches holes in it. It stops it in its tracks before it can ever even try to get to your cells. And so sure enough, when I started investigating, I saw that in Italy, they had gotten it approved. The problem with ozone is it's incredibly cheap. It's incredibly safe. It's been used for decades. And yet, because it is not able to be patented, there's no financial incentive to get it through millions of dollars of FDA testing, even though there are thousands of studies on ozone in the PubMed, but it hasn't gone through the quote FDA testing to get the ability to make claims. So consequently, physicians have not been able to even discuss it. Fortunately, in the state of Texas, I was able to request a rule change because in most medical boards, they have what are considered violations by doctors. And in Texas, unless the physician follows the generally accepted standard of care, they are in violation. So in the June Texas Medical Board meeting, I had submitted a rule change to add on to that without informed patient consent would be the violation. Not that the fact that the doctor wasn't following informed consent, because they are not following standard care, because there was no standard of care early on. In correspondence from the Texas Medical Board, I have that the standard of care of the CDC was simply to provide infection control, immune supportive care by supplemental oxygen and ventilation. That's it. And that's still the only standard of care that the CDC is endorsing. The FDA wasn't until later in the fall that they even, quote, approved remdesivir, which is only available through delivery in a hospital once they have gone through, gotten more serious. And there's been very damaging reports on the use of remdesivir causing kidney shutdown and complications, and it's expensive. So this is the environment we have. And the National Institute of Health put forth a policy of guidelines that states that they do not recommend the use of any agent for SARS-CoV-2 pre or post exposure prophylactics outside of a clinical trial. I've asked numerous doctors, have they ever been in an environment where a government policy was intruding in the practice of medicine, where the jurisdiction of the practice of medicine is regulated by state laws and licensed by medical boards? They've never seen such government intrusion as saying don't treat people who are symptomatic of a virus. Doctors treat viruses. They know different substances that have been used for decades that have been beneficial, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin. But what we had in this example was emergency use authorization. This is by 21 USC 360 law about authorization for emergency use products. In this document, there are sections that state that there cannot be a approved, adequate, or alternative for treating the disease. Because if there is something that'll treat it, these vaccines could never have received emergency use authorization. So that was kind of a long answer, Sharon, but knowing what our doctors have been through and how they were threatening to lose their license, how they were having difficulty getting their prescriptions filled because in Texas, even the pharmacy board was intruding on the practice of medicine. We had doctors prescribing hydroxychloroquine because fortunately, in July 31st, the Texas Medical Board put forth a press release that clearly stated that the decision to treat COVID is between the physician and the patient through informed consent with use of all complement alternative medicine laws. At that June meeting, they also clearly stipulated that ozone could be used under complement alternative laws. So fortunately, because we've had cooperation with our medical board, we've been getting these statements out, but that's kind of where we are. So I also do, I wrote patient assessment software for the home health care industry. So I'm very fluent in the processes of caring for patients. I do graphic work. So every time I hear something complicated, I usually see a picture, and I think pictures help convey what's happening. I'm not saying it's all 100% right, but at least it gives something for people to have some perspective of.
Absolutely. And actually you covered my second question there, which is what your background is in all of this. So my third question is what is your mission then? Because I admire that in Texas, you've started this process, and I'm hoping that this will spread to other states. And what would you say to us other integrative type practitioners who want to use this therapy for people, but feel, subverted in how we're using it because we're afraid of legal ramifications of this?
Well, the role I have played since I am not a licensed healthcare practitioner, I am the public, and these agencies' mission is to protect and serve the public. So having an individual come in and start intervening on behalf of physicians and nurses and even patients who've been abused by physicians or hospitals. We need engagement of lay people on behalf of lay people to intervene and get, you can share the rulings that came from the Texas Medical Board, which has traditionally been one of the most stringent and least welcoming of anything complement alternative medicine. And due to our rapport that we've had, we're working on that and we're making improvements. One of the first things I asked was, how do you file a complaint against the agency? Well, that was in 2016. They didn't even have a complaint policy until July 2nd of 2018. Well, now they do. In November of 2019, the nurses came to me and said, help us, our board's even worse. And sure enough, they too did not have a complaint process, but they got a complaint policy together in about 3 months. So once you get people involved who have the capacity to interface between these agencies and even the legislators, it's complex, but I have made success working with many different people, not just myself, and also understanding the role of these agencies, that can only do what law and legislation allows them to. So like at the bottom of this, these are my asks of Department of State Health Services, who are tasked with educating about public health. So here is the public education we are hoping they start disseminating on signs and symptoms of blood clots, what to look for, hemorrhaging. Don't ignore that frequent bruising. A big one I'm very concerned in is that there's studies showing that a third of COVID patients are going to exhibit brain inflammation. When you have brain inflammation, it can exhibit as neuropsychosis, as depression, anxiety, agitation, rage, confusion, brain fog, memory loss, hallucinations, mania, hearing voices, hearing music. So if this happens, people are going to think they're, quote, losing their mind. And I'm very concerned about them being led into the psychiatric realm of care, which actually uses a completely different, a different method of diagnosis from a different book called the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual. I would highly recommend people clearly understand the difference between pure psychiatry and neuropsychosis due to brain inflammation, which is known to come along with this particular virus. Also, what's being talked about is these long haulers, which is continued, where you just don't snap out of it. You don't come back to normal. And there's another concern of that. the moral of all this story, the primary cause is brain inflammation. I mean, not brain, just inflammation in general. So we will be getting together recommended use from the conference that I just attended. So that's my goal, is to try to get public agencies to start admitting and giving people information that there are concerns. I talked with one group, they had no idea that there had been this number of reports. And in Europe, it's even worse. In Europe, there's been over 10,000 deaths and over 400,000 adverse events because they were ahead of us. So all these serious illnesses of 17,000 serious illnesses, a big concern is those are going to turn into lifetime health problems. And when you look at the data of who the majority of the people that are in the adverse events from taking the vaccination are in the age bracket of 17 to 64, which is also the group that would have had like a 99.6% survival rate. Now, maybe who would have, if they had COVID, that 99.6 survival rate, and would have had lifetime immunity from natural antibodies rather than these hyper fired up aggressive antibodies being built to the vaccines.
That's wonderful. I love that you have all this data here, because this will be useful. So for someone like myself who have been planning on, engaging in the community environment in terms of educating people on various things, this is definitely something that I would love to try and elucidate for my community. So my next question is, some of this data that you have talk about COVID, the vaccination, versus, symptoms from that versus symptoms from the COVID infection. Now, what would you say, because this is something I also struggle with, I'm trying to define my stance on, is, well, if you're going to have hypercoagulation from the infection itself, as been reported during last year's pandemic, we don't know how we're going to respond to this virus. But if you're going to have that anyway, why not go ahead and protect yourself with the vaccine and have the same risk? What would be your response to that?
If you look at the clinical trials of how these vaccines were conducted, number one, they were only conducted on healthy people. They explicitly excluded anyone that was on any medication or had any prior condition, which I think is gross. I'm even thinking of the word gross irresponsibility.
Negligence.
Have that kind of test, and then now who are they injecting it into? Probably what, I don't know, 60-70% of the population that are on some form of medication or have some sort of condition, and they're doing it in drive-bys. In fact, there was a video of soldiers in Dallas injecting people in 7-Eleven and on the streets. The aspect of how this is being, if you're going to take a vaccine, you need to have it done by your doctor who knows your condition, who's recording when you got it. You know who to call into. This program, I think, is public endangerment, how they're going about it. So you're back to your question. A lot of it also has to do with minimizing your exposure. So how much are you going to get? 13 trillion billion exposures to viral particles person to person? That's not how many they put in a testing room when they're doing a test. So it's really about limiting your exposure. And I just pulled up reference to this Dr. Kevin McCarran out of Japan, who is a large ape researcher who has mapped the brain and has emulated Tourette's in the brain. So a lot of the information that we have comes from him. He's retired British, and does daily programs, and he can get a bit spicy in his communications. So that he's right. So that's on there. Here are some mystery brain illnesses clustering in Canada. I'm talking about Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, the hallucinations, the muscles. There's articles from, you can just Google and see articles of people who are starting to experience inflammation. I would also invite you to read about this SARS pandemic and Event 201, which are government programs of them simulating what a pandemic would look like. It was printed in 2017. There are so many attributes in here that is identical to what we're seeing right now. What they called it Coravax. Also, you should know that HR 742, which was Corona Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act, was introduced in January 24th of 2019, a full year before the COVID pandemic. Why? How'd that happen?
Right. Now, yeah, that was great. Thank you for that that response. And I think that this site really, is a great place for people to kind of go and reap the benefits of all this research that you've put into it to come to one point, because everybody's so confused running around with like a chicken without a head, not knowing what's happening with this or true information about the true nature of what's going on. So having said that, I found myself talking to a colleague who was a nurse, and I've worked in the pediatric intensive care environment for decades, where we see the sickest of the sick, and we've worked with this COVID, well, not this COVID virus, but we have worked with COVID virus where children have died. Some children have died from it, but not in this way. So it's been around for a while, and we tend to see the sickest of the sick. So when I spoke to an intensive care unit nurse, she felt that she saw the different angle of what's associated with this COVID infection, which is a wide inflammatory response to children after they've been exposed, and now they're returning to the hospital with bleeding type things and all this weird symptomology requiring them to give that remdesivir and the IVIG and things like that to help them get better. So having said that, her feeling on the topic was, well, I don't want my child to go through that, so I'm going to vaccinate them. So, when
about a vaccine that at most in their own documentation talks about the fact that they only had 60 days of data to go with it. Just because someone doesn't have an adverse event promptly afterward doesn't mean that it's not going to have potentially highly serious consequences in days or months or years. We don't know, because we've never had this type of vaccine program ever be successful. In fact, when they initially tested it on animals, it was when the animals had that second exposure to the virus that the animals all died that had received the mRNA virus vaccine. So it's very concerning. I would take my luck with I can't even say this is a natural virus.
Right.
Used to, with viruses, they did come from cross species of animals: swine flu, bird flu, rabies. We've always had interaction, but now with this CRISPR technology, where you can cut and paste and get particular attributes of different viruses and combine them together, which, based off the information I have seen, I believe that's what we see here. When you see that PRRA component, and you know that it doesn't show up in any other virus sequence, this table that this came from is very, very long. Only this one has that, and you get this bang for your buck when you use it. Blood clotting, bleeding out, paralysis, hyperfiring, and crossing blood-brain barrier. Wow, what a combo. And then you throw in HIV so that it replicates in the virus, so HIV never really goes away. But with all that said, we have methods such that people aren't dying from AIDS because you turn down the fire from the virus. You keep it quiet. There are drugs that have been successfully used for HIV like that. We will have means to help squelch this, but we can't do it so long as everybody's talking about how great the vaccines are and what a savior to the world they're going to be, when we've already got this kind of data showing this is not going in the right direction. This is 144 days. So, Colleen, as a layperson, I'd like to give you an opportunity to see if you had some questions.
Wow, my head's spinning right now. I want to thank you for allowing me to be part of this and all the work that you put into this. Mind-boggling, but it's actually some simplistic in the way that I've heard this story before. Is with, I hope I'm saying this right, the Gershwin theory, the doctor who had cured cancer naturally. I'm a naturalist. I don't like to put foreign things into my body, but I almost succumbed to getting the vaccine, because of family and friend peer pressure. And I just thought, I don't want to handle this anymore. I might as well get it. And like you said, people have only had it a short time. Nothing's happened to them, but they're not looking at the long term. And luckily someone spoke to me and said, what are you doing? You like organic stuff. Why are you thinking about putting something foreign in your body? And so what I'm kind of interested in is the ozone therapy that you're talking about. Is there a test that you give to let us know if our immune system is weak and in need that, or should everyone take that therapy?
What's beautiful about ozone is it has no contraindication. There's not a downside to taking it. They actually use it often in these anti-aging clinics. The process is it's called major autohemo, and you pull about 250 mils, like you're going to go donate blood, and it's in a heparin bag that keeps it from clotting. You pull about 250 mils of blood, and you go to an ozone generator, which simply takes medical grade oxygen, runs it through a generator, and out comes ozone gas that you bubble into the bag of blood, shake it, and give it back to the patient. Now people go, oh, air embolisms. No, air that we breathe is 80% nitrogen, not pure oxygen. Ozone is 3 atoms of oxygen. So it's not air that you're putting into the bag of blood, it's 3 atoms of oxygen. And that's what is being carried on your red blood cells right now is oxygen. So that's why, no, you do not get an air embolism. It's a very simple process. We hope everyone starts providing availability for ozone. In fact, when this started, I tried diligently trying to get a program that instead of just going and getting your blood tested in these drive-bys with the tents, that you could have actually gone and had a major autohemotherapy. It takes about 45 minutes. You could have done it in your car and had actually received some therapy rather than just being told you're positive. But we know now, because of the policies and that the fact that the criteria, they had to say that there was nothing that could be done. Because if they acknowledge hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or budesonide or any of these that were showing working, they couldn't have gotten their emergency use authorization. So now what we're looking at is Pfizer going full steam ahead. Now, this is the same Pfizer that was fined $2.3 billion for fraudulent marketing years ago in their drugs. So now we're supposed to trust them. And now they're pushing to get it into the 12 to 15 age bracket with the end game of making it a government mandated childhood vaccine. Because the next step from them is moving from emergency use authorization and moving into approved status of the FDA. And I will say again, emergency use authorization is not FDA approval. And that's how come the vaccine manufacturers have not been able to advertise their vaccines, because only FDA approved drug can, quote, have claims. These are not FDA approved. So they've been using social media and they've been using celebrities to market their experimental drug in mass volume to the population.
I have another question. People who have taken the vaccine, would the ozone therapy help them? Or, I mean, I don't want to say it's too late or.
No, here's the thing. As long as people are breathing, nothing is too late. So everyone can have an opportunity to start enhancing their choices and trying to pursue less inflammatory conditions. And a big part of that is fear. So down here, you're going to notice that on the home page, what should we do? Keep your immune system up with good nutrition, exercise, words of encouragement, kindness, enjoyment, and hope, and not falling into fear is the best advice for any condition or situation. God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. Go read about the whole armor of God. Read that 1,000 may fall at thy side and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come near thee. You, me. You know, we
I
can't.
just
control
read
other
that,
people.
Psalms 91. I just read that today, Psalms 91.
Beautiful. We've got to, you cannot make decisions for other people. You cannot dream their dreams or have them believe what you believe. We are each individuals and we are each accountable for what we believe, for how we spend our life and how we'll spend an eternity. So I encourage everyone
Yes.
to be kind, open the doors, help someone. So with that, I want to thank each of you for coming, and we'll get this posted, and thank you so much. I hope it helps many people.
Thank you.
For your time.
Thank you so much. And I want to tell Colleen just real quick that, just talk to me because I'm trained in ozone therapy treatment, so I can give you some more information on it.
And
Yeah,
stay tuned.
I might have to fly over there.
We'll
Thank
be
you,
posting.
Sheila.
Hopefully, we will be getting information of where more doctors and practitioners can become educated on the use of it and get it out there to everyone. So thank you so much.